What's going on, guys? Welcome back. Kellen here with Droid Life, and we're doing a comparison today of the G3 to the Galaxy S5 and the One M8. So these are essentially the big flagships of the year up until this point anyway. And, we did a quick comparison with some of these at the G3 launch, but we wanted to really show you guys a closer look now that we've got all three in-house, sort of a closed environment. So let's compare these two first, G3 and Galaxy S5, obviously, since the Galaxy S5 is still one of the hottest devices on the planet, and LG is, trying to see if they could take some of that share away from Samsung. So we'll just do a quick spec refresher here. We'll start with the G3. Obviously, you've got the 5.5-inch Quad HD display. You have a 2.5 gigahertz Snapdragon 801 processor powering it, 3 gig of RAM, 32 gigs of internal storage with a micro SD card slot that supports up to 128 gigabyte cards. You have a 3000 milliamp hour battery on the inside that is actually removable. 13 megapixel camera with OIS plus a 2.1 megapixel camera up there on the front. It supports LTE, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, all of the big carriers. Obviously, this is the AT&T model. USB 2.0. And it's 8.9 millimeters thick and weighs just 149 grams. So it's quite light for a large device. For refresher on the Galaxy S5, you got that 5.1-inch Full HD Super AMOLED gorgeous display, 2.5 gigahertz Snapdragon 801 processor, same as the G3. You have 2 gig of RAM instead of 3, 16 or 32 gigs of storage with an SD card slot that again supports up to 128 gigabyte cards. You have a 16 megapixel camera on the back, 2 megapixel camera on the front, a 2800 milliamp hour removable battery on the backside, LTE support, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, all the big carriers. You're looking at 8.1 millimeters thick and 145 grams. So they're about the same thickness and same weight, even though the G3 is actually a little bit larger with that bigger 5.5-inch display. Overall, though, G3, it's sort of got it in terms of the specs on paper. If you talk about, the Quad HD versus the AMOLED, it's got 3 gig of RAM versus 2 gig of RAM. It's got optical image stabilization plus built into the camera. It's got a slightly bigger battery. And in terms of just new tech, it does kind of have a slight edge. But when you look at these displays next to each other, the AMOLED on the Galaxy S5 really is the superior display. It might not have the as high resolution or the pixel density, but these are both full brightness, and that AMOLED, the colors on it just really pop. They just really look gorgeous. That's not to say that the Quad HD on the G3 is not great as well. It just looks a little dull when you compare it to the AMOLED there. As you all know, DisplayMate, who sort of rates smartphone displays, said that the Galaxy S5 display is the best ever put in a smartphone. I would say they still hold on to that title, even though the G3 has a Quad HD display. But other than that, the size is a little bit different. Obviously, the G3 is a big phone, does have on-screen keys though. The Galaxy S5, which it has grown compared to the Galaxy S4, actually feels quite small after you've held the G3 for some time. Obviously, it has that physical home button with the fingerprint scanner built in there. But I say I prefer the feel of the G3 in hand just because it has this really nice curved backside, whereas the Galaxy S5, just sort of feels like kind of a dated box. If we look on the side here, again, they're about the same thickness. G3 is 8.9 millimeters. Galaxy S5 is 8.1 millimeters. There are no buttons on the side of the G3, and there are on the S5. So you've got this sort of soft dimple touch backside on the S5, which doesn't feel bad in hand, but this sort of faux brushed metal look, even though it's plastic on the G3, feels incredible. So the S5 tends to be a little bit slippery in my hand. The G3, I have yet to ever worry about it slipping out. I've got speakers down there on the bottom. I've got a heart rate sensor on the Galaxy S5, which I forgot to mention. And again, that fingerprint scanner on the front. The G3 has neither of those. There's your cameras. So 16 megapixel on the GS5 versus that 13 megapixel on the LG G3. But you also have laser autofocus on the G3, which the S5 doesn't. You also have that volume rocker power button combo going on. Both have flashes. And, that's kind of the backside there. The camera on the G3, I may prefer a little bit more, but we can get into that later. Up top, IR blaster on the G3 and mic is about it. Headphone jack on the GS5. On the bottom, you got headphone jack on the G3 and a USB 2.0 port. You do have a USB 3.0 port on the Galaxy S5. You'll notice that cover there because the Galaxy S5 is water and dust resistant, whereas the G3 is not. Now, you will see videos on the internet that say the G3 actually is water resistant and all of that stuff. Technically, it's not. While it might be able to withstand some water here and there, it's not a waterproof and water resistant design like the Galaxy S5. So there is a knock against it if you're looking for something in particular. Overall, though, I do prefer the G3 in hand, even though it is slightly bigger than the Galaxy S5. It just feels better the way the curve on the back sits in your hand, whereas the Galaxy S5, it's still kind of that squared off, rounded corner, dated design with the faux metal plastic around the outside. It's definitely not my favorite phone of the year. The G3 is quickly becoming one of my favorites. It's doesn't have very many faults, that's for sure. Let's take one look, though, at the removable backs. So both of these devices have removable backs and removable batteries, which is kind of cool for those of you that need to hot swap batteries and really run through those. You can see both of the big batteries there. Again, 3000 in the LG, 2800 in Samsung's. Then you have this sort of stacked SD card slot, SIM card slot thing going on up there in the top right as well. Both also are capable of wireless charging, though neither of those come with it in the US out of the box. You need to buy replacement backs for those to enable wireless charging. The international variant of the G3 has it out of the box. In the US, the carriers want to rob you, and so they charge you for that accessory, which is kind of unfortunate. All right, so let's talk now about the HTC One M8 and how it compares to the G3. Just a spec recap on the One M8. You've got that 5-inch Super LCD 3 display, full HD, not quad, 2.3 gigahertz Snapdragon 801. So it's still an 801, it's just a slightly lesser 801 than the S5 and G3 have. You have 2 gig of RAM, 32 gigabytes of internal storage, plus a micro SD card slot that supports up to 128 gigabyte cards. On the back, you have that 4 ultra pixel sensor with the sort of duo camera sensor setup, which is, you either love it or you hate it, right? You have a 2600 milliamp hour battery that is non-removable. Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, LTE connectivity, all that good stuff. You're looking at 9.35 millimeters thick and 160 grams. Obviously, you've also got the all-metal design, which the LG3 has the faux metal design. So if we look at them side by side, you definitely see the differences immediately, right? The HTC One M8 has, those boom sound speakers up front. It feels definitely a lot slimmer in hand. The LG G3 is quite wide, actually, because of that 5.5-inch Quad HD display. The LCDs, I would argue, are close, although I'd probably give the edge a little bit to the One M8 just because it seems like the colors are just more fine-tuned and they just look a little more natural. They also look a little more vibrant, almost AMOLED-y, if you will. The Quad HD just, again, sort of like when I said against the Galaxy S5, just looks a little washed out, maybe a little dull at times. Again, it's not bad. It's just not quite as good, I wouldn't say, as the LCD3 in the One M8 or obviously the AMOLED in the Galaxy S5, which is just an incredible display. But you can see side by side here, quite different designs, that's for sure. In terms of weight, the G3 is definitely lighter. The One M8's a heavier device. It's also slightly slippery, or very slippery, I would argue also. But they both have that sort of brushed metal look, even though one's metal and one's not. But the One M8, it started to grow on me more than, say, the Galaxy S5. But now that the G3's in hand, it's really starting to take over. So let's just do a quick tour here. You've got nothing on either side here other than that SD card slot on the One M8. Power button up top on the One M8, and then that giant IR blaster. On this side, you got volume rocker and SIM tray on the One M8, nothing on the G3. They both have headphone jacks on the bottom and micro USB 2.0 ports. And then on the back, again, there is that dual camera setup for the One M8, the single 13 megapixel sensor with laser autofocus on the G3. You have that speaker on the G3 on the bottom, and again, you have the front boom sound speakers on the One M8, which are unmatched by anyone in the industry. The boom sound speakers really are pretty incredible in terms of a mobile phone with speakers. It's kind of awesome. So just really quickly, here is the Galaxy S5 one last time. We'll just kind of do a brief software tour if we can here, and just talk about maybe some of the differences. I'm not going to do a full tour here just because, you know, that would make this video 30 minutes long or something, and you guys have seen our software tours before. But you've got sort of different takes on lock screens. The home screen setup sort of the same, although LG's kind of gone with a flatter style in terms of icons and things like that. And, you know, the notification trays aren't all that much different. Settings really aren't that much different, although Samsung has an insane amount of settings in there. But you can just see the skinning differences. Again, you have the on-screen buttons with the G3, whereas you have a physical home button with that fingerprint scanner on the GS5. Again, you guys have seen our software tours, so we won't really dive into those. Tough to compare cameras in a video like this as well, so we can do that outside of this. On the One M8, you've got Blink Feed and Sense 6.0. You also have a sort of more traditional Android 4.4 two-panel notification tray, and then your settings sort of look, you know, sort of traditional, but they've been lightened up. You got on-screen buttons though, and so, you know, you can swipe into Google Now or get into your app switcher, your back button, and it's sort of that traditional layout that we actually really love, that we wish Samsung would someday adopt. Obviously, you have some more settings on the G3. You know, that's just sort of a brief software look that I wouldn't say I prefer one of these skins more than the other. They all do things that sort of drive me nuts. They also all do things that I really like. But overall, the G3 is really, really good device. So if you're thinking about getting one, you are not thinking in a wrong direction there. It's definitely a great device. If you got comments, questions, let us know. We're Droid Life. Peace.